Hi there, Aquarius, and welcome to your 2026 year ahead horoscope. We are going to be looking at the major shifts and changes that you're going to be experiencing in the coming year by looking at the transits of the planets of Jupiter out to Pluto and the alignments that they are going to be making to each other. And we're also going to be looking at how the eclipses are shifting from Virgo and Pisces to Leo and Aquarius in this year, and what that's going to be meaning for you as well. And this is for Aquarius rising, especially because then all of this will align very perfectly for the whole sign houses in your chart. But you can definitely also watch this for Aquarius sun. So this is a very special year astrologically, 2026, due to the alignment that I am showing on screen here, which is completely unheard of, and we haven't found this really at all before, looking back thousands of years. But we have all of the outer planets aligned at the same respective degrees of the signs that they're in and in aspect to each other. So we have Pluto's going to be at 4 degrees of Aquarius. Neptune is going to be at 4 degrees of Aries. Uranus will be at 4 degrees of Gemini, and Jupiter as well will be at 4 degrees of Leo. And this is going to concentrate a lot of these alignments around the July-August timeframe, which is likely to be about the loudest part of the year. But to me, this really looks like a calling, some kind of a strange and wonderful, beautiful call to action that is going to be especially impacting those who have planets in their chart around 4 degrees, because then you're going to be getting hit up by those placements by all of these different alignments. So if you want to look and see if you have placements around 4 degrees, you can do so at astro.com or astroseek.com, where you can draw up your own chart and just see if you have anything at 4 degrees. Or, of course, I also do personalized year ahead readings, which looks at all of your different placements and all the different alignments that you're going to be getting and different timing techniques and so on and so forth. So I can also do that for you as well. But here we will be looking at all of these different alignments that I have here. So we'll go through this list and I'll give you some dates, and then we're going to dive into each of these. We're going to look at and delineate all of these in turn, but as we go, we're also going to keep in mind that these are all aligned to each other. So I'll also mention how they're going to be reinforcing each other as well through their alignments. So we also have another really significant alignment coming up in this year, which is the 36-year Saturn-Neptune cycle, is coming back around to an exact conjunction again. Last time this happened was in 1989, so it's a pretty big deal. It speaks to a major cycle that is restarting, a new cycle basically that we're coming into, and that is going to be taking place, the exact conjunction, on the 20th of February of 2026, and that's going to be just after Neptune moves into this house on the 26th of January of 2026, and Saturn moves into this house, moves into Aries on the 14th of February of 2026. But again, the exact conjunction point is the 20th of February, and beyond that, these two are going to be co-present and therefore still interacting with each other and still developing together through the end of the year. And in fact, they'll be co-present here through the beginning of 2028 when Saturn finally moves on. Neptune will remain in this sign and in this house of yours until about 2038, 2039. And then we also have coming up this year the movement of Uranus back into Gemini. So this is moving in now permanently into your 5th house when it goes into Gemini. And that's going to take place on the 26th of April of 2026. And that will also remain in that house not only through the end of the year, but that one's going to stay there until about 2032, 2033. Jupiter will be moving from your 6th house into your 7th house when it moves into Leo on the 30th of June of 2026. And that will stay there, again, not only through the end of the year, but until about June, July of 2027. So for a solid year, from the coming summer until the following summer. Pluto's going to be in your 1st house all year. It's been moving back and forth into this place since 2023, and it's going to stay here until about 2043, 2044. especially because of the alignments it's making, is going to be more significant likely this year and more reinforced. But also, I just want to go over these themes for you each year and just kind of remind you every year that Pluto is going to be in your first house. So we'll also look at that one. And then we will talk about the fact that the lunar eclipses are going to be staying in the old signs that they've been in for about a year and a half since 2024, which is Virgo and Pisces. So we're going to get one of each, a lunar eclipse in Pisces, a lunar eclipse in Virgo, but the solar eclipses are going to be shifting already this year into your first and seventh house as we have them in Leo and Aquarius there. So we'll have a solar eclipse in your first house in Aquarius in February, and then we're going to have a solar eclipse in the seventh house out in Leo in August. And that'll be February 17th for the Aquarius one, and then August 12th for the Leo eclipse. So with that said, let's go ahead and dive into the actual delineation of all of this. So the Saturn-Neptune conjunction has a lot to do with dissolving old structures. There can be a kind of reality testing element to this alignment. There's a lot of healing and releasing, reimagining, and matters of discipline come up very strongly with this alignment here. And it's going to be taking place in your third house, which is going to be speaking very directly to matters of your community and your connections around you, your communications, your voice, how you communicate. This can literally speak to siblings and neighbors as well. But ultimately, it's the people, places, things around you, and the way that you interact with these things and that you exchange with them. We do also get the mind in this place, so opinions as well, and what's going on for you mentally on a conscious level winds up showing up in this place. So this will help to put you more in touch with what's going on mentally and more able to kind of exercise some discipline and authority over what's going on in your mind personally. So when it comes to the mental clutter, when it comes to the whole information overload that we've been dealing with as a society for some time, when it has to do with the opinions that you are forming about the world, things like this is putting you more in control of that. It is removing some of the illusions that may have been impacting your mental space. Now, I will say when it comes to mental clutter, this one might be a bit interesting. You may have noticed a bit of brain fog or a little bit of weirdness that came up this summer when these two first kind of dipped into this sign a little bit. And you may get that on the front end of this transit again, in terms of just some kind of brain fog and a bit of confusion and things like that. But that should flow quite seamlessly, especially if you are trying to kind of actively exercise some authority over what's going on in your brain and where that energy is flowing to, so that there's hopefully fewer leaks and things like that, and that clutter basically. So it should lead to clarity. One of the keywords with the Saturn-Neptune conjunction is disillusionment, so illusions. Also, another major keyword to that alignment is clarity, is what it winds up bringing in through the removal of those illusions. So like I said, on the front end, might be a little confusing, but that is to work you to a place where you have greater clarity. So this should help with mental clarity. But also, and I'm going to kind of harp on this a bit, opinions and ideas that you have about the world. That's one thing that Saturn-Neptune speaks to anyway, is the narratives, the old guard of narratives, what we believe about things. And especially when we kind of get into a rut, or we just get into like common sense, conventional thinking and things like this. On a global scale, this speaks to what we believed prior turns out to not be true. And therefore, we need to reframe the whole thing. We kind of need to go back to the drawing board because Saturn winds up showing us all of the illusions that Neptune's bringing up. Neptune's going to show us all of the illusions that Saturn's been bringing up for us throughout this whole period of time. And where that intersects with opinion is pretty big. So for you, that's going to be kind of reinforced by the fact that it's in this place where your opinions are formed and where they're held. So I would imagine that a lot of the ideas that you've held are going to come under some sort of reality testing. Now, I'm not saying, And so don't shoot the messenger, please, that like your opinions are wrong. That's not at all what I'm trying to say here. But it's likely that even if it's not your opinions, that there's a lot of focus, mental focus on how different people's opinions have carried some level of illusion. And there should be clarity around truths now that are more like day-to-day truths about people or places or policies or things like this. So more on the day-to-day level in the third house there should be a greater clarity around that as you move through this year, and that Saturn and Neptune continue to talk to each other about where the illusions may lie in this place, right? So additionally, in the third house, we deal with correspondences and documents and things like this. Also, your like day-to-day plans, like the commutes you take, the errands you run, basically a lot of the kind of running around plans and schedules and stuff like that, connecting with others and coordinating with others. A lot of that winds up showing up in this place as well. So when it comes to those schedules, those are likely to undergo some pretty big shifts in order to make those schedules and things like that, those plans and your daily life more effective, more efficient, feel like it's more tapped into a reality structure of what's actually useful. But also any sort of correspondences or documents, like old ones that you haven't dealt with for some time, this is going to be speaking to releasing a lot of that as well. So you may literally be decluttering when it comes to documentation and things like this. And I even wonder, this might be an interesting practice, but if you feel on the front end of this a little bit of brain fog, if you actively choose to go through some old documents and things like that and like throw things out that you don't need anymore, that might be a weirdly helpful process for getting rid of the brain fog as well. You may also be releasing some old notions around your community or your locality or those around you. So if you have had some assumptions about how you should be showing up to your community, so maybe some of this is along materialistic lines or kind of keeping up with the Joneses, or this could be what you think people's expectations of your behavior and your beliefs and your values and things like that. That could also be coming up. Maybe there are some illusions that you have about your siblings or extended family or something like this that are going to be kind of revealed to you around this period of time as well. But also about any sort of authority structures or institutions within your community. This can also be speaking to some disillusionment when it comes to those things. So I'm thinking about church as, oh, we're family, or workplace as, oh, we're a family, and really being put in touch with, okay, no, there's actually a lot of maybe cynicism or something like that around this. And I feel like I have had those illusions kind of swept away through things that I can't unsee. That's one thing with the Saturn-Neptune conjunction, is it's going to be showing you things that you can't quite unsee when it comes to your community and those connections and things like that. So if there are any illusions, those are going to be shown. If there's not, I wouldn't say that, oh, you need to give up all of your communities or anything like that. This is just about reality testing those narratives, reality testing those connections and those communities, and discerning the illusion from the truth as well. Also, just because you're disillusioned with something doesn't mean you have to step away from it either. But we can just have a more realistic framework or image, basically, of what it is that we're dealing with. And with that Saturn-Neptune conjunction in your third house, it's likely that you are going to feel like you are in a position of greater clarity and authority with those around you on the other side of this as well. So this may even be a tendency to kind of play small, where the disillusionment is around other people having it more together, or other people being able to have more of a say, within those community connections. Now, additionally, this could even stir up a bit of really thinking through your community and where you want to live and what you want to be surrounded by, the energies that you want to be dealing with, it's likely to be drawing up some sensitivity along those lines. So if you are more sensitive to people's energies and attitudes and things like that, I would be compassionate with yourself about that. But that also is one of the ways that Neptune will try to show us truths and things like this. So if you're noticing that you can't handle as much negativity from those around you, that's probably Neptune saying, hey, these people are pretty negative and they're putting a damper on your attitude, your ideas about things. And so it may be showing you, maybe you've outgrown some communities. Maybe you need to release some groups that you belong to or some people that you deal with day to day. And maybe you want to reorient toward a new cycle of people that you deal with that feel more aligned now, that feel like there's something that's worth kind of feeding into there. So again, especially because we're dealing with discipline and putting our effort toward these things and taking these things quite seriously with Saturn moving through this area, that Neptune is going to want to make sure that things are pretty ideal before we start pouring a lot of our energy into things. And sometimes that's the disillusionment that can be kind of most significant, is that we start to pour a lot of discipline and effort and energy into something, and then we realize, okay, that was a bit wasted. So again, if those kinds of things wind up coming up, I would just try to look at the gift side of that, of the fact that you did realize, and also then pivot and try to bring that discipline and that effort and that energy into something that is more ideal. So that's ultimately what this is about. What kind of community do you want to be having around you? What kind of connections do you want to have? What kind of relationships with your neighbors and your peers and your siblings do you want to have? And what steps can you take to either connecting with new people that fit into that image, or shifting and changing those connections gently so that they feel like they're on a more solid foundation as well? You may also find that with this alignment that you're very sensitive to the needs of those around you. That can also speak to that kind of sensitivity to the energies around, but you may decide that you want to get involved in some community works or something like that to address some social responsibility that you feel like you have to your community as well. Also, when it comes to your voice, literally, this is going to be bringing some strength to that voice. It will bring some authority to your voice. It's also going to bring some seriousness, like taking seriously your words, the content of what it is that you're saying, the ideas behind it, the way that it impacts people, and how people are responding to that. So you'll be taking a lot of that quite seriously and on multiple levels. So this is going to work to mature your voice quite a bit and to refine what you're speaking to. So it's bringing that truth in as well, but it's also doing so in a way where you can be impactful, but not by being the loudest, but by being the most clear in your ideas, in your words, in the way that you express yourself as well. Additionally, with Neptune working on inspiration, and especially as it's connected to that Uranus in your 5th house as well out here, this is also going to be bringing that way of expressing yourself with a lot of clarity and a lot of honesty and your own personal truths and things like this, bringing that into very practical way of expressing that. This could have you writing more or starting to write, putting your ideas out there. I really would not be surprised if there's like a creative thing that you're doing that you're intending to share with others. And that could also wind up putting you into something of a leadership position or a leadership role in your community as well. So there's a lot of opportunities here to heal any sort of ego attachments that you have to outdated ideas about your community, your place within it, just information, generally speaking. So opinion and news, media, things like that, all of those just ideas that we deal with on a day-to-day basis as well. So any sort of attachment that you have to specific outcomes or specific things being true or certain people being really righteous, I think that's one of the worst ways to go, because usually we wind up being disillusioned when we do that. But then through releasing some of those attachments and not holding on to any sort of narratives or things like this, being able to then ground your ideals and ground your opinions into really practical frameworks that are reality tested. So not needing for something to be true, but just allowing for the truth to develop based on the evidence that you have and based on the convictions and the values that you have. So yes, your own personal truth and convictions and things like that, but also allowing for the evidence to speak to you and being able to take that in and not reject it because there's not that grasping onto, I need for this thing to be true, right? I hope that makes sense. Now, some of the shadow aspects of this, again, especially on the front end, we can deal with some weakening kind of boundaries. So perhaps especially around that February-March timeframe when they're really close to each other and Neptune is really wearing down some of those boundaries of Saturn. That's also why I was speaking to that confusion is more likely on the front end of this is like the structure, the ability to like grasp onto an idea is a little bit weakened when Neptune's right on top of that Saturn. But again, ultimately, any sort of that weakening of boundaries or weakening of your hold on your mental processes, your thought processes, and things like this, any of that confusion or things like that should be actually strengthened as Saturn starts to move on from that Neptune there. Because all of the BS structure is going to be worn away by that Neptune, and then you're able to just build something that's a lot better in that place, right? This is a test that Saturn hasn't been through in this thorough way in like 36 years, is the thing. There is also the authority erosion in your community. So that kind of disillusionment around maybe some community leaders, maybe church leaders, maybe leaders in your workplace or your extended family. There's, again, that kind of removing the veil from your eyes. And this will also be encouraging quite a bit and working through responsibility when it comes to your schedule and where your energy is flowing and how your energy is getting impacted by those around you, as well as your voice and the impact that that has on people and the content of the words that you speak, and hopefully not having that attached to certain outcomes or things like this. This is going to be driving up in your mental space a lot of imagination and idealization. Neptune's going to be doing that for the whole time till about 2038, 2039 as it moves on from this place. But what's special about right now is that imagination and idealization, which is really beautiful and will be occupying some of your mental space there and bringing a little bit of magic to that day-to-day life and your thought processes and so forth. Saturn in this place is going to be trying to work on, okay, how do I take this imagination and these ideals and things like this? How do I make them real? How do I make something tangible out of this? So that's part of why I was saying you may start writing if you don't already. And if you do, then this would be having you take that a lot more seriously as well. So yeah, ultimately, this is going to be speaking to a whole new karmic cycle when it comes to your connections to other people. So moving on to Uranus in Gemini, as this moves out of your fourth house, it's moving out of a place of your home and your family life and a lot of shifts and changes and disruptions that it's been doing and creating for about 7 years in those areas of life. Now in April, on April 26th, it'll be moving into Gemini permanently. And that's going to be your fifth house. And so it's going to be speaking then to matters of your creative self-expression, of your creativity, generally speaking, the activities that you love, any sort of like pleasure principles in your life. So what you love, the people that you love to connect with, pleasure-based relationships, so friendships and people like this, that it's just because you like spending time with them or that you like how you guys spend time together. So if you're on any sort of teams or things like this, it's going to speak to that. Hobbies and just the things that you love. This is also the place of your children as well, if you have children or any children that you may know, as well as your own childlike nature and the inner child. So if part of what Uranus has worked up in the fourth house is some recognition around family patterns or things like this. This may be bringing some of that awareness into the fifth house and allow for you to shake things up when it comes to your inner child, maybe do some reparenting or whatever it is. So Uranus and Gemini is going to bring up in this place, your fifth house of expression, a lot of innovation and freedom, disruption. There can be this kind of awakening or acceleration. And so when it comes to your creativity and any of those like creative outlets that you have, expressive outlets that you have, there's a need to allow for those to thrive with Uranus here. There's an encouragement to shake that up, to allow for yourself to really enjoy things just for the sake of enjoying them, and to give yourself time to be in that space of play and joy. So this can speak to novel activities, novel creative expressive outlets, novel mediums if you're already a creative type, so different types of creativity as well, new friendship groups, new interests, new hobbies, things like this. And especially any that really encourage originality or experimentation, those are likely to thrive quite a bit. This could even have you getting into different genres than you typically do, either movies or books or music or whatnot. Just enjoying things that are of a very different style than they have been up until this point. So there's an interesting kind of individuation or allowing for yourself to really grow into a unique individual as Uranus is moving into this fifth house, really embracing and celebrating that as well. So you may go through a few phases when it comes to interests too. I wouldn't be too shy or hard on yourself about that. You are supposed to be picking up different things from different interests. So it's likely that there's going to be at least a few different phases that in the 7 years until like 2032, 2033, that Uranus is going to be in that place, that there will be a few different phases of new interests, new ways of expressing yourself in that period of time. So it won't just be a one and done, this is the new thing and it's all we're doing kind of a thing. This will have you breaking from conventional modes of expression and of joy and play and pleasure multiple times, and reimagining and like reconnecting with that inner child, not needing to rely on old notions of who you are or who you spend time with or what kinds of things that you're supposed to be into. This, to me, the fifth house is also a place of like lack of inhibition. So it's where we can uninhibit ourselves. It's opposite to the social pressures that we can feel in the 11th house. So opposite to the fifth house. This is where we can just be kind of truly ourselves. And so, again, if there's been an identity that you have held fast to for quite a while, and that would make sense given the fact that you're getting shaken out of some community roles and possibly into some new community roles, as well as Pluto being in your first, which we're going to speak to, that also changes deeply who you feel like you are, the role that you feel like you play in this life as well. So if there's been attachments to old social labels and the restrictions that they wind up carrying with them, this is going to be disrupting those quite a bit and saying, if you enjoy it, if you like it, that's plenty of a reason to pursue it. You don't need to explain yourself, basically, and you don't need to fit into anyone's boxes as well. So this is really helpful for liberation from stagnation as well, rocking the boat a bit to have fun, wanting to shake things up, wanting to go and do something adventurous and new and exciting, wanting to have that kind of excitable energy in there in your life. Also, if you've had any creative blocks, this should be shaking those up quite a bit as well. And if you run into any creative blocks when this transit is going on, so for the several years that you're going to have it, whenever you do run into creative blocks, that's when I would recommend come back to experimentation and try to break out of the expectation, basically. And that should help to shake up and remove that creative block the whole time this is here as well. So yeah, a lot of opportunities here around inventive, experimental self-expression, originality, authenticity, a real embrace of your own true joy embracing a sense of personal freedom and authenticity, an ability to be yourself and be idiosyncratic and really embrace that and not worry about whether it fits other people's expectations of you. This is also, to me, a pretty strong house of like spirit, your spiritedness, so inspiration, but that spiritedness that winds up coming through with that as well. And this should help to just kind of keep that moving and keep that shaking so that it remains an important part of your life. That's going to help to keep you out of a rut. Now, there can be surprise pregnancies is one standard read on this transit, so important to keep in mind. If you have children, this is likely to speak to them individuating and them coming into some pretty unique interests or unique friends, unique identities, unique ways of expressing themselves, and they may be pushing you forward as well. So they may be a catalyst of change for you. So I would try to embrace some of those quirks, as long as they're not dangerous or anything like that. Embrace the novelty that your children are presenting to you rather than trying to kind of shut that down and, say, the whole back in my day thing or anything like that. Now, on the shadow side of this can be quite impulsive, especially around what you want, the pleasures and things like that, indulgences and things like this. So this could be just like, I'm feeling claustrophobic, I want to do something different, and I'm just going to suddenly take a vacation and I'm not going to think about how much it's going to cost or anything like that. And then there can be a bit of like regret on the other side of that. So just try to maybe keep in check the extreme impulsive nature that this can wind up bringing through, and risk taking as well. So think through the risk taking if you can. Also, any sort of disregard for your friends. Uranus can be a bit distant. It can be a bit, not standoffish, but just kind of disconnected. And because friends do show up in the 5th house, or those pleasure-based connections that you have with people, this can have you just kind of not paying a lot of attention to the significance of that connection, ultimately. This can also take the thing that I was saying about going through phases to an extreme and have you kind of rapid cycling through, oh, I'm going to do this hobby, and you buy all of the stuff and then you get bored with it immediately, and then, oh, I'm going to do this, and then you buy all the stuff, and so you may wind up accumulating some hobby clutter, and some of that is to be expected, but maybe pay attention to how quickly you are dropping interests as well. Now, this is going to work on the level of creative genius for you a lot. So I would really recommend, if you're not already writing or doing some kind of a creative, expressive thing, the way that for you, Uranus and Neptune are going to be working together, I'd recommend it. I would recommend journaling or some kind of dealing with words or ideas, like a cerebral or intellectual creative outlet, I think would be super cool and weirdly satisfying and possibly really impactful. And this may be something that you then want to put out into the world as well. That would be super supported by this. Also, this kind of liberation impulse that's going to be working on that level, again, around pleasures and things like this. And it is going to be stirring up some tension between individuality versus that group identity. So again, this isn't about staying in other people's boxes, but you may find yourself a bit isolated if you can't feel like anyone is really worth connecting with. That's kind of the way that I would expect for that Uranus to disrupt friendships, is just kind of feeling like there's no one's really interesting you. So that is something to maybe kind of keep in check if you find yourself a bit over isolated around this time. But yeah, there's a potential for huge quantum leaps when it comes to personal development and personal growth, especially around your spirit and your expression. So turning to Jupiter moving from your 6th house into your 7th house, in the 6th house recently, it has been working on the tasks that you're doing. So it's been working to make your routine a little bit more enjoyable, more effective, more productive. It may have had you feeling quite busy. but also enjoying your work a bit more in recent times and for the first approximately half of the year until about June 30th, when it's going to move into your 7th house. So from that point forward, it's going to be bringing a lot of courage and creativity and joy and play, and potentially even a focus on leisure with Jupiter in Leo to your 7th house. And the 7th house is quite straightforward. This speaks to your one-on-one connections, especially so partners, romantic partners, business partners, close friends, clients, people that you're dealing with one-on-one. And it can also speak to other people, generally speaking, as well. So with that Jupiter moving into your 7th house, there can be this kind of confidence or leadership or magnetism that you feel with regard to other people, like people are coming toward you a lot more, like there are a lot more connections available to you. There may be a proliferation of your sense of partnering with people and connecting with people. There can also feel like there's a lot of doors opening in that place, so opportunity, growth through your partnerships as well, and that partnering up with people should be really beneficial to you around this period of time. But again, just on this kind of broader level, people are approaching you better, like people being more beneficial to you, people being more considerate toward you. And part of that is going to be regarding the energy that you are bringing to certain situations. So really radiating optimism, enthusiasm, charisma. This should help you with those connections quite a bit as well. And that's part of what's going to magnetize those new connections toward you. This can also speak to taking connections or partnerships to higher levels as well. This is one of the transits that we would look for in terms of an engagement or a wedding or something like this, or going into business with someone. It's also going to encourage a lot of like taking risks and adventurousness and things like that with other people. So being just really open to experience, being open to hear people out. Again, especially as the trine winds up building up between that Jupiter in your 7th and then that Neptune in the 3rd, this is going to point to an openness or an excitement and an idealization around connecting with people. It should, again, it's also going to help to derive a lot of benefit from that as well. So that winds up self-reinforcing. This is also going to encourage a lot of generosity on your part, big-heartedness, just kind of liking people a bit more through this period of time, really affirming others, possibly even taking people under your wing or mentoring people as well, or meeting a mentor. You may definitely wind up having someone in your midst. That can be one of the literal ways is for a transit like Jupiter to be embodied in a person that you're dealing with one-on-one. And that can be a mentor or a guide, or someone who's giving you a leg up, someone who is beneficial to you that's in your midst that you're connecting with. So yeah, this one is kind of pretty straightforward. It's just luck and fortune and benefit and good things and confidence and things like this through your connections with other people. You may also find yourself in a leadership role, really being recognized by other people, acknowledged for what it is that you're bringing to the table, especially your energy and your enthusiasm. Collaboration is definitely recommended all year. Through the 6th house into the 7th house, this is going to be a great time for collaboration and mutual benefit. But there can be this kind of shadow aspect to this as well of ego. Typically, when we're dealing with Jupiter in Leo, the downside is over pride or over ego, competition, things like this. So I would watch out for some ego clashes, especially if people are triggered by you. That opposition is going to be loud. The opposition between that Pluto, which is in your 1st house, to that Jupiter in Leo out in your 7th, especially around that July-August timeframe, you may feel like there's a lot going on that's really cool. Your alignments are great, by the way. This is one of the better setups that we have in terms of the houses that these placements are occupying. But around the July-August timeframe especially, there can be some real flare-ups with other people around ego concerns. And so that may be highly competitive. This may be envy or jealousy or things like that winds up drama, just kind of for the sake of drama, that winds up creeping into some of your connections. So I would recommend try not to take stuff too personally as well. That could be really helpful for avoiding some of the worst aspects of that. For instance, if someone is behaving weirdly, consider, is there an envy aspect there? Are they frustrated over some recognition that you're getting or something like this? But also over idealizing other people and partners, especially when we get that trine between Neptune and Jupiter, remembering that we are getting some disillusionment around some people around you with that Saturn-Neptune conjunction. So on the front end of that, there may be some illusions that may also wind up feeding into the 7th house transit that'll be going on a bit later in the year. But additionally, try not to go through the disillusionment process. Recognize that maybe some people weren't all that they seemed like they were, and then going straight into idealizing some other people and thinking, oh, well, they don't have these difficult qualities, so I'm going to build them up now as a kind of replacement. So just kind of some things to consider throughout this time. Also, in terms of needing validation with Jupiter and Leo out in the 7th, something to kind of watch for on the shadow level with this. But yeah, ultimately, this is going to be feeding into a lot of wonderful optimism, good idealism when it comes to your partnerships as well, not just the over-idealization. This should help you to integrate with other people, to work well, to harmonize with other people quite a bit. Again, that mutual benefit is going to be very well supported by this transit. And a lot of just expansion, abundance of the people around you, a lot of fortune through the people around you, a sense of unity as well with those around you. You may also find that there's a connection that's coming in that feels somehow destined as well. And that's wonderful. Again, making sure that we're not over-idealizing people would be really helpful. So that's going to be playing into this Pluto in your first house, which, like I said, it's been building up for some time, but it is going to get exacerbated by, one, the opposition from that Jupiter and all of these alignments as well. It'll get reinforced by this, but also by the fact that you do have that eclipse coming up in this house as well. So this is going to be highlighted a bit more for really a few years here, as we have all of the eclipses taking place in Aquarius as well. So Pluto brings up themes of power, transformation, personal regeneration, depth, surrender. And this is basically speaking to a few different phases, very likely. It's not just going to be a one and done kind of a thing. That Pluto's going to be there for like 20 years, but a few different phases of personal regeneration of who you are, who you feel like you are, what roles you want to fill, what feels aligned to you, any sort of fears around yourself and your roles and things like this. Those will come up to be addressed so that you can no longer be disempowered by those fears. There's a lot of really deep change and purging, empowerment, facing the shadow that winds up coming up with Pluto in your first house. So you can be really deeply and fundamentally honest with yourself about who you are and who you want to be, and surrender any sort of outdated notions of yourself. Now, the first house, if it hasn't become clear already, this is also a pretty straightforward house like the 7th is. This is you in the chart. The first house is where you show up. This is your personality. This is your physical body. This is your roles and what you initiate in your life. This is your self-image, how other people see you, how you portray yourself, your presence, etc. So this is fundamentally you. And the transformations that you're going through around this coming year, I think that they're going to feed quite a bit into changes and improvements in how you relate to others. So a change and an improvement and a regeneration, a rebirth with regard to how you see yourself relative to other people because of that opposition with Jupiter there especially, but also, again, that is something that is kind of standard also for eclipses in the 1st and 7th houses, because it's pinging that axis of you and how you relate to other people. So really profound personal rebirth that is going to be ongoing. There's going to be phases to this, year in and year out. This is going to encourage a lot of encounters with power and potentially even control dynamics too. There's a huge power theme, like powerful people, that plays out when we're dealing specifically with alignments between Jupiter and Pluto. So I would expect for you to be put in positions of needing to engage with people who are in positions of perhaps very, very high power. And you may really need to hold your own and prove yourself to yourself and maybe even to them in those dynamics as well. And that can be a really profound experience of kind of lifting yourself up to meet someone that seems like they might be, quote unquote, at a higher level in some way or another when it comes to power. Keep an eye on those control dynamics as well when those wind up coming in, and any sort of power differentials that you're encountering in your life, because they're likely to have some really big lessons to them, and they can go great, but they can also be kind of difficult. They can be a bit triggering. They can bring out the shadow and things like that with Pluto in the first house. So ultimately, speaking to a lot of death and rebirth cycles, endings that open up new lives, big personal rebirth that winds up taking place as Pluto moves through this house. There's also a lot of truth dynamics to Pluto and to Jupiter as well. And so as Jupiter is kind of spurring on that Pluto, this is going to help you to really see yourself quite clearly. And again, see your connections to others quite clearly. And that's going to push a big transformation in your self-image, in the way that you carry yourself, in the way that you influence others. That's one thing with Pluto in the first, is that it's going to increase the impact that you have upon others in terms of your energies, your influence over other people. The Saturn-Neptune conjunction in your third house is going to do something quite similar. That Jupiter out there in your seventh house is also going to be quite similar. So I would expect for you to be having a really profound impact on those around you through this time. And you can definitely use that to a kind of mutual benefit. But ultimately, when you recognize the impact that you have on other people, that is going to really transform your self-image. And it's going to put you in touch with a kind of subtle power that you carry with your presence as well. So that's likely to be something that you're recognizing in this year. Again, especially around that July, August timeframe. And possibly also February, because that's when you're going to get that solar eclipse in the first house along with that Pluto, even though Jupiter hasn't moved into place yet. So also this is going to make you quite a bit aware of subconscious drives and desires that you carry, and who you deeply want to be. So not just who you already are, but who you're trying to become. There is that becoming aspect to Pluto, which is very deeply profound and has a lot to do with instincts and willpower and the application of will and self-control to yourself in order to become who you truly want to be as you're reaching for greater influence, for greater presence, etc. So again, try to pay attention to those intense encounters with people and any sort of projection that you are doing to other people, that they are doing to you. That can also really transform your self-image if you're able to tap into, how do people tend to project on me? What are people's quote unquote fears of me? What do I trigger in other people? You can actually wind up then learning a lot about yourself and how your energy impacts other people through that as well. And that can also wind up being a major catalyst, again, for that change in your self-image, that personal rebirth. That can be that catalyst there. So yeah, there's this kind of intense purification and renewal, regeneration of who you are, the roles that you fill, and how you see yourself and how you carry yourself. Big opportunities for reclaiming a sense of inner power and autonomy over yourself, emotional honesty, and a willingness to heal any sort of triggers or fears or things like that is going to be especially helpful with this alignment. And also channeling the intensity of feeling, channeling the intensity of your drive into perhaps especially like creative outlets or something like this that feel deeply meaningful to you. So with that trine to Uranus in your 5th house, especially. And again, I'll just remind, just keep in mind the impact of your voice around this time. That Pluto is encouraging it, the Jupiter, and then also the Saturn and Neptune in your 3rd house. It would also be really helpful to focus quite a bit on shadow integration. So not just rejecting the shadow, looking at it for what it is and integrating it. Pluto's going to support the heck out of that. And it will offer a lot of opportunity for you to do that in a very healthy way as well. But just watch for extremes around manipulation or control, obsession, any sort of power struggles or fears around loss, fears around alienation, fears around people having control or power over you as well, and then therefore overcorrecting and overasserting yourself as well as any sort of resistance to personal rebirth or resistance to a surrender of outdated notions of yourself, outdated roles, and things like this. So we can see how that is feeding into what I was saying about Uranus also in the 5th house too. That Pluto also is going to wind up reinforcing that Uranus in the 5th house, the individuation aspects of that. So with that said, let's go ahead and talk about how the eclipses are shifting. So they're shifting from your 2nd and your 8th houses, where they've been for about a year and a half or so. They started up in Pisces and Virgo in 2024, and that has been speaking to matters of your resources, your sense of security or insecurity, your sense of dependency upon others versus your ability to stand on your own 2 feet, things like this. So those themes are still going to be a bit under the surface with the lunar eclipses that are coming up. We're still getting a lunar eclipse in March in Virgo, and we're going to get a lunar eclipse in Pisces in August. So those themes are still going to be coming up, but this is coming more to the surface, where it's not just what's going on with regard to dependencies and self-image and so on. This is speaking to how do you carry yourself and how do you relate to other people overtly. So on the surface, it's much more out in the open now in the 1st and 7th houses. So this is where the solar eclipses are going to take place in the coming year. We're going to get a solar eclipse in Aquarius in your 1st house in February, and we're going to get a solar eclipse in Leo. That's actually going to be a big time, long total solar eclipse in Leo in your 7th house. So that's going to be on August 12th. And you may meet someone hugely significant to you around that period of time. I do have to throw that out there just because that is a big, heavy hitting total solar eclipse. I think it's supposed to be the longest of the century. Plus, you're going to have that simultaneous with Jupiter out in your 7th. So can absolutely speak to meeting someone who's going to have a really profoundly, hopefully positive, but definitely new impact on your life. So this is encouraging as the North Node is moving from your 2nd house into your 1st house. This is encouraging embracing your authentic self and becoming a leader, stepping into roles that feel like they're very true to you and who you are, and that you're able to really be authentically yourself. And the South Node moving into Leo, out into the 7th house, releasing any sort of people-pleasing tendencies. Again, this is a reminder to not overly rely upon validation from other people as well. There may be some relationships that wind up falling away, but I would expect that there's going to be a lot more that are coming in because of the fact that Jupiter is also out there in the 7th house as well. But just when it comes to the people pleasing, when it comes to the over generosity, when it comes to holding people up on a pedestal, again, any sort of over idealization of other people or over dependency upon partnerships and things like that, again, there's possibility and there's opportunity out there to have those mutually beneficial relationships with people, but try not to over rely upon, I need this other person for this kind of a thing. Definitely recognize the contribution that you are bringing to situations as well. This is about learning to relate in a way that is respectful of not just others, but also of yourself and what you're bringing to the table. So the shadow side of this, again, that south node, especially out in the 7th house, really rebelling or kind of door slamming a lot of people, that winds up isolating you, or any sort of neglect of the interpersonal balance. So again, respecting yourself just as much as you respect others, but also try not to necessarily door slam everyone. There's probably going to be some connections falling away for sure that you have outgrown, or that has felt like they're taking up too much space or something like this. We can also take a step back from connections that feel too intense or too demanding and let them process a bit. Let them simmer a bit and come back to it and see if they're able to meet you halfway at a future date, right? So there can also be a bit of impulsiveness when we're dealing with eclipses, and also when we're dealing with a Jupiter and Leo that is kind of impulsive. So try to temper those decisions. And again, stepping away from any sort of drama or comparison to others and things like that as well. Competition with others. You should only be competing with yourself, basically, to become a better and more empowered and more individuated version of yourself in this coming year. That's really going to be the name of the game here. But yeah, I think that is pretty much everything that I have for you for 2026, Aquarius. Very awesome, very dynamic and cool alignments that you have coming up. So it should be a really significant year of a lot of breakthroughs, a lot of creativity, a lot of recognition of who you are on a fundamental level, and acceptance of that and enjoyment of that. So yeah, I hope that this was helpful to you. If it was, and you don't mind, I would really appreciate it if you gave it a like or a hype. That helps to spread the video around. And also just a reminder, if you would like to dig into your year ahead a little bit more granularly, I do offer personalized year ahead readings that are tailored to your entire chart and all of your placements, going through different kinds of timing techniques and stuff like that. If you are interested, I do offer that at Sociastrology.com. And there is also information in the description box below for memberships, where we go into astrological topics every month. We do weekly forecasts. So if you are interested in that, there's information in the description box. And do consider sticking around by subscribing. We tend to look at transits in these ways where I will dive into each week how a significant alignment that's coming up is likely to impact us all globally and impact the collective energy, and then impact us individually based on our own charts, like I have done here. So if that is of interest to you, then yeah, I would love to have you here. And again, I hope this was helpful. I hope you have an absolutely beautiful year. And thank you so much for spending this time with me.